You're listening to the Rise to Thrive podcast with your hosts, Linda Tate and Amelia Travis. Rise to Thrive is your life resource for manifestation, wellness, and abundance. Tune in weekly so you can thrive daily. This week's episode coming at you.
Welcome to Rise to Thrive with your hosts, Linda Tate and Amelia Travis. This week's episode, Beyond Boundaries, what happens when you've outgrown a relationship? How to deal, how to pivot, how to respect, how to love. Welcome with your host. Hey, Amelia.
Hey, friends. Super excited to chat with you guys about this week's topic. What happens when you outgrow a relationship, whether that's a friendship, a family relationship, or a love relationship? There comes a point for all of us where we are like, hey, this isn't working. Am I right?
You're right, girl.
So right. And so this came up recently because one of my group coaching clients was actually asking this specific question. She said, I'm doing a lot of this personal development work and I feel like I'm really starting to understand myself better. And as I do that, I'm looking around and I'm realizing that there are some people in my life who are just energy vampires. Like they are just a drain on my energy. They're always bringing me down. They're negative. We could unpack that whole realization on its own and like what that means when, you're able to look around and see that maybe other people aren't playing at the same level as you. But without even necessarily needing to do that, I think all of us can probably take a moment of pause and identify a time in our life where we realize like this person has got to go. Like they got to go. They don't get to take up emotional real estate in my life anymore. Linda, has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, I had a flashback to a breakup actually. And I was after tacos sitting in the car and I'm like, and that was literally like, this isn't working. When you said that, that's what flashed in my head. And I think to acknowledge that there's grace in this process, like literally in that moment, I'm like, this isn't working. And that was all I said. And that was like a breakup. And I've done that in jobs where I don't even know what to do. And I'm like, this isn't working. And I say it and I haven't maybe processed like, or had the foresight to know what that would mean. I just say that truth that in that moment is for me and maybe over connection to the intuition, because then there is repercussions of what that means. But I think being able to identify when something isn't working is the huge first step. And sometimes one of the hardest ones, and it sometimes hits you like a 2x4 because in that moment, maybe you had the rumblings, but you weren't ready to have exactly in that second in a taco after taco date, like a breakup,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you mentioned, jobs like that was just like a quick pass over, but I think it's really important to know like for everyone listening. So when we talk about outgrowing relationships, you can outgrow relationships, friends, family, love relationships, jobs, business relationships. There's times where like it maybe isn't even a long-term or a formal relationship, but it's just the realization that, hey, like I'm not gonna be friends with my husband or my boyfriend's friend's girlfriend. Like that's not a relationship that I need, right? And then how do you gracefully navigate those waters of like, oh, like this could be a little bit awkward. Like I'm supposed to like hang out with this person, want to be friends with this person or whatever, but like I don't like them. I don't want to. It's not serving me. I don't have space for that in my life, right? There's all kinds of different reasons that we reach the point where we're just like, this isn't working. Maybe that's the title of this episode. This isn't working.
And it's, I think like it to a degree, somewhat like that simple. And so much what we've talked about on this podcast is like about like life priorities and being in alignment. And, you only have so much bandwidth. It's 168 hours in a week.
Amen, girl.
When something's not working, it can be that simple where it's like, I'm not going to spend another second of my day or time. And it's not like there's no offense, right? But it's just literally, maybe there was already 4 hours a week of free time for friends. And for the person that's considering like shifting their friends group, there could just be a pullback. There could be a time where instead of those 4 hours being friends, those 4 hours now are one-on-one time with yourself to create space for the new friendships to come into your life. And, it's like, oh my gosh, but then I'm lonely. It's like, no, you might find something new about yourself. You might go to a class you've been dying to try. You're connecting at a different and a higher level than you had been able to give yourself the opportunity to before, because you kept filling that time with people that you got to that point of, this isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways that we can choose to outgrow relationships. And I think for most of us, I know I have a pattern, and Linda, I don't know if you have a pattern, but like I've always been a bridge burner personally. I'm changing that now as a conscious and mindful adult. But I'm a Libra, I'm an air sign, I'm impetuous, Enneagram 7. Like if it's not fun, I'm not doing it. That's like my life mantra, right? So what that has resulted in is like, even the drama can be fun in a weird way for a while. And I think with many of my relationships, that is what I was responding to. It was a blend of like codependency and addiction to the drama, and like,
scratching the variety bucket.
Totally. Right. But then it was like a flip was switched. Nope, that's not right. A switch was flipped. Switch was flipped at one point, and I was just like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden scales fall from the eyes, like light bulb comes on, like this isn't working and I'm done, right? And then like picture little me. I see like this long like rope bridge for some reason, like one of those hanging bridges, but it's like really long, and I'm just like scuttling across it like with a big fucking red can of gasoline. And I'm just like dribbling it behind me, like do. I see this person like on the other side. I don't know what they're doing. They're looking the other direction on the other side. And I'm
picking papayas.
Yeah, cruising across the long hanging bridge, and I get to the other side. And I'm like, get my little flamethrower, and I'm like, just like light it up, like, and it's like when I'm done, I'm done. I'm so done. And the way that usually manifested was like not no warning, no healthy communication of it, no preparation for them, and it was like immediately overnight erecting a boundary that went from 0 to 100, where then I had allowed either so much to go down, giving too much of myself or allowing abuse or whatever, just extending myself so far that then when I erected the boundary, I had nothing left to give. And so I would just burn the bridge, and then like they were dead to me. Right. And you guys were like, wow, I don't ever want to be friends with Amelia. But that was my MO. And that was the way that I dealt with letting go of not just even relationships, but anything. Like I was like, okay, I'm done with this. That's how I feel right now, by the way, about being done with school. But I'm not doing it. I'm staying the course. And so maybe you have a pattern. There's other people who are just like, they're ghosters. Like they're like, no, I don't burn the bridge. I don't say anything. I just gradually like disappear from the person's life and then never answer their calls again. And I'm like, okay, that's one way of doing it. And then there's yet others who are like, I've never had a bad breakup. Like I've always just like told the truth and we stay friends. And I just look at these people like they've grown a third head. Like, not even a second head, a third one. Like they already had two because they're already weird. And now they're 3-head alien. And I'm just like, I don't understand you. Like, that's amazing. In my mind, I'm like, they're lying or they're crazy or like, it's like, that's not possible. So which one are you, Linda? Like
I'm a hybrid. Like, as you say that, I think there's little bits and pieces to all of them. And like the bridge burning, I would say that's probably the least of how I am. But one of the things I've noticed that if there were unhealthy behaviors involved, like it was easy for me to ghost. So what I mean by that is if it was like connection to maybe like college binge drinking times, like I just felt like instead of looking at it as the friendship and those behaviors as separate, I had put that all together and I'm like, yeah, that's okay. Like we're not friends anymore. And as I'm even saying that, I'm like, that's unfortunate. And it's not even necessarily bad feelings. And I can clearly see the distinction between the two. And these are people that I have loved dearly and cared for dearly at different points in time. And that's definitely one thing that I would say is like, if any of my friendships had shifted or relationships shifted, it's, I would say 99.9% of the time, like with such love and just more of like a capacity issue. And if alignment worked out for us to have a phone call or, you know, a catch up or whatever, I would be so excited. And I had gone from what I had considered more of like the friend collector, where I would be like, just wanting to stay friends with everyone that I had never been friends with. I mean, sending Christmas cards to everyone. And it became like at the cost of honestly, like me taking care of myself the best that I could. And also like nurturing the relationships that were most important to me. Like, why am I still trying to reach out to someone that I literally haven't seen in 5 or 10 years? That's gets to a weird point where like that person doesn't equally like make the effort with me. So just, I would say letting go of like the control of what I thought they should all look like and be more open to like the ebb and flow of life and people moving in and out of life and like the beauty of that and the beauty of not needing to stay up on everything and trusting that like it doesn't mean that I'm a bad friend because I don't know the names of your 3 kids and the 2 dogs, like that you can just tell me that and I can love you. And
I love this so much because I feel like that provides such cool contrast, because I do, if it is a spectrum, I do feel like our tendencies anyway are kind of like towards opposite ends of the spectrum. Like where I have received feedback or criticism, whatever you want to call it, about like not being connected enough or not, which is interesting because for my close friends, they're like, that's really hard for me to imagine. Like you're such a close and connected and like caring friend, but I'm not super communicative. Like if you don't text or call me, like I'm probably not going to text or call you. And it's not because I don't care about you. It's because like I fill my life. I fill every day. I fill every hour. Like I have lots of things that I love to do. I have a, you know, career that I love. I have a family that I love. And like my days are full. You know what I mean? Like I'm not sitting around going like, oh, gee, I haven't sent, you know, a letter to this friend in however long. Let me like reach out to them. In fact, if you know and love me, you haven't received a Christmas card from me since 2010. And that's because I haven't sent any. So you're welcome and thank you. And I'm sorry. But almost like giving myself too, I don't even know if it's too much grace. At times I think it is. At times I'm like, I'm a little too lenient with myself and just being like, burn the bridge. Don't send the Christmas cards. It's my life. I do what I want, right? Like it's my life. I do what I want has sometimes taken me into like a little bit of hot water, if you will, or just not being super cognizant and aware of like other people's feelings, right? And other people's feelings matter. But it's always been this balancing act of trying to figure out like, I do deeply, deeply love other people and I want other people to love me. And so at times I've really overextended and given too much of myself and had a difficult time finding the measure of like, where is the sweet spot? Where is the spot where like I am protecting my own boundaries, I am honoring my own life and my own needs, and I'm still able to give to friends at the measure that they need in order for it to feel like a healthy and balanced friendship or relationship with them. So I love to hear that, you know, that you have struggled with maybe feeling like you want to keep all the friendships, you know, where it's like easier for me to just be like, if it's supposed to work, it'll work and I don't have to do anything. And that's like, I think that's a slippery slope, you know what I mean?
The other thing I've noticed is that I'd be like a fun, like new friend. Like I'm like the fun new girlfriend, like, but then in friend terms, like I'm really, and it's really convenient and it's really fun. And it's like this really intense, fast friendship that is unrealistic. Like I don't really have the sustainability for that type of relationship. And And then
For
I've
that level of attention, you mean? Because it's like a lot of
It's
texting or a lot of hanging
much, yeah.
out.
And I'm like, how did I even get myself here? And it could be from like little like ebbs and flows in life, right? Like maybe I'm leaving my job and like I have a little extra time. And there's something beautiful about that level of experience. Like maybe it was the perfect time for both people to engage in that kind of closeness and intimacy. And then week 5 comes and it's like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And it not even maybe being personal, it's just like the reality of life. But I would say for myself, just noticing more realistic boundaries around that to begin with. And like, if it feels more one person to another versus both ways, like maybe in those instances I hadn't even been like the one like so eager, it just happened and I'm like, oh, this is fun and cool and fits in my life and my schedule, but I wasn't really like giving as much, and then I felt like an asshole, like that's happened. And but I, that's one that's interesting where it's like, okay, so what would I do differently? I don't know. I would do something differently. I guess it would be a boundary,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or like just slowing the pace, or I think it could happen where I'm losing some of my own self, like alone time, and like filling that. So
Yeah.
checking in around that.
Yeah. I have found myself, especially after having a child, almost like giving a new friend warning. You know what I mean? Like if I make a new friend, and it's I've learned to do it in a way that's like compassionate and hopefully not super egotistical, because sometimes when I do it, I'm like, well, maybe they're not even trying to like be your friend at that level. You know what I mean? But I find myself like giving people a little bit of a heads up, like when we have that strong connection and I'm like, wow, this person's so cool. I'd love to hang out with them. I'd love to spend more time with them. And I know that realistically, it's maybe twice a month that I have time to go out and do a 2-hour girls lunch pedicure. Like that's about, that is about the amount of time that I want to take away from my family, my work, work, school, everything. Right. So I found that when I connect with new friends now, I'm just really straight up. I'm like, my life is super full, and I'm really grateful for that. Like I'm doing a lot right now. I'm going to school, I run my own business. I've got a 2-year-old, and I'm sure you understand because we all have a lot in life. And I would love to develop a friendship, and like, usually about once or twice a month, I find time to kind of do something for me or like have some girls time. So how about like we exchange numbers and see if we can just get our schedules to sync up sometime in the next couple of months.
I'm going to put you on a bi-weekly email calendar advice.
It's like, and it's funny because that sounds so premeditated and so planned, when in actuality, if you text me the morning of and you're like, yo, I'm going to this concert tonight at 7, like, do you want to go? I might very well be like, hey babe, like, can I go to this concert tonight? Are you cool with watching Tanner? He'd be like, yeah, cool. And I'd be like, yeah, cool. See you there. And it's so easy, and I think something important to note is that what I have observed in myself over the years is that level of ease is something that feels really good to me in a friendship. And so I look for that and I value that. And one thing that can facilitate that ease, which you and I have really beautifully, Linda, is a blend of like strategy and planning and structure, and then flow. Like it's like, this is our plan. This is what we think we're going to do. And maybe this is just you responding to me, or maybe this is the way you work as well, but you'll be like, let's then check in like day of and see if that's still the plan that we want to have. Right. That doesn't always work, not for like a cross country, like trip or whatever, but it's like we have found a balance that works for us, and we can then honor that.
Yeah. And you bring up, I think, an important point in that too, is like, there's the flow, there's the space for the flow, right? So when it can be too rigid, there's not the space. And then just the honesty. So like on the front end of a newer friendship, being like, hey, like this is where I'm at in my life and this is what's going on. And I love spontaneity. This is the reality of my life. Let's see how we can move forward. And it's like being willing to speak the truth at different spots along the way. And that
Yeah.
sometimes can be hard.
Yeah. Well, what I've found is that I give off such a open heart and like love, you know, just I love people. I freaking love people, man. People are awesome. I love them so much. You're like, and I have found the pattern is that I'll develop friendships, specifically female friendships, where the friend on the other side has a different expectation of what female friendship looks like. And this is really important because their expectation is, and this is like literally I've heard it in these words, if we are really friends, then fill in the blank. And for many of them, it's if we are really friends, then we will text every day. If we are really friends, then you will respond to my text within an hour. If we are really friends, then we will talk on the phone every week. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Who does that? But okay, right? Like, for me, if we are really friends, then you will fully understand if I don't respond to your text in an hour. If we are really friends, then
I might not talk to you for 6 months.
And then you'll get a flood of me where it's like we're together in person or whatever. If we're really friends, it maintains, and there's a sense of compassion and understanding that flows between us that just gives a lot of grace for the other person to be where they are in their life. And that is the foundation of my female friendships that have lasted, I can think of the oldest one since I was like 9 years old, and I'm 33. So I can't do that math, but it's a long time, right? It's like 24 years or something, a long time.
The ride or dies.
Yeah. And really like that is also the case with the newer friends who are like that. So I think expectation is, we've talked about this before, but expectation is so important. And I think being able to recognize what your own expectations are in any kind of relationship that you want to apply this to, so that if your expectations aren't being met, you can then look at them and be like, oh, I am upset, resentful, frustrated because my expectation isn't being met. Was there a foundation for that expectation? Like, did I ever check in on that expectation and make sure that we were both in agreement on that? Because
like the preconceived ideas, like leading to so much suffering, right? Like, what should that look like? It should look like this. And it's like, so I have a funny story about that I can share if you want me to.
Yeah, share.
Where there was a time that my dad wasn't very happy with me.
No.
And he said that, he said, well, I just had this idea of what your life would look like when I found out you were, my mom was pregnant with me.
I was like, whoa, this story's about to get crazy. I didn't know you were pregnant.
No. And he said, and I said, well, Dad, like I'm 31, like, I'm sorry that my whole life was such a disappointment, but like when you were, 28 years old and had this idea of what my life should look like in 30 years. And as I'm saying it, I can feel him processing of like, well, that's kind of dumb,
Yeah.
And it was so powerful. And that's kind of a drastic example of an expectation hangover without.
But I like that because that's an example in like the family setting, right? Where we have such ownership of family and we don't even necessarily realize that we do it. But like, you're his daughter, right? He made you. And so then there is this unspoken ownership that he may not have even realized that he had. And within that ownership, it was like, he had his expectation. My daughter's life will look like this. My daughter will do this as a career. My daughter will marry this kind of person. My daughter will treat me this way. And that's based on his relationships with his parents, or the things that maybe weren't fulfilled in the way that he wanted them to be in his own life. And we all do that. We all project our own desires, expectations, needs onto other people. And it's a question of like, to what extent, and then how can you regain mindfulness of that and be able to look at it and observe it, so that you can then analyze like, oh, okay, this is actually not it's not for them to fulfill that expectation of mine, or that need of mine, or that desire of mine, or whatever. So outgrowing relationships. So let's talk a little bit about, like, obviously breakups are probably the kind of maybe first thing that people think about when they think about outgrowing relationships. And it's like, because you either do or you don't, right? Because we have an expectation of monogamy in our culture, which means that it's either the one, and I'm putting that in quotes, or it's not. So you're always waiting for it to either be the one and decide that it's the one, and then, okay, we're going to be together forever, or the only alternative, which is not the one. And that means I'm now outgrowing this relationship and I have to release it and let it go. When I look back over all the different ways that I've outgrown relationships, or that someone has outgrown me in a love relationship, I would say it's been maybe, it's been like maybe 2 that were relatively amicable and peaceful. Three that were like amicable, peaceful. Like today, if I were to see that person on the street or on the phone or on Facebook or whatever, it would, like, we're cool. You know what I mean? We're cool. They're probably celebrating what I'm doing. And then an equal number or more with the burning, flaming pyrotechnics bridge. But I think so I think what I'm telling you guys is, like, I'm not the greatest person to tell you how I have figured out how to gracefully outgrow relationships in extended family, in friendships, in love relationships. I think I've just been such a self-preservationist that I'm just like, let me get the F out of here and burn this bridge, right? But I think it's universal, whether it's like a breakup or letting go of a friendship or quitting a job. I think there are some, like, pillars of, like, how you release it that are the same. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think there's parallels. I would say, like, one is just the being so honest with yourself as the number one, right? And then there's some communication that needs to take place. And I think the way that you have that communication could vary, especially depending on the different relationship. I hear right now that, like, Bumble ghosting is really popular.
Oh,
It's just like,
I say, oh, like a grandma who's like, oh, I'm not even sure I know what Bumble is, but it's Bumble ghosting. Been married for a while, you guys. Bumble, it's a dating app, yeah?
Yeah, I hear that people
I'm with it.
that people stop just talking to each other. That's become, there's almost this, like, disassociation with, like, newly dating, then you just don't have to respond anymore, and, like, it doesn't hurt anyone's feelings, and that, I don't know, there can be this, like, jaded element in the human connection through dating in that way. So
I think this is super important, because I really do think that the rise of digital communication is degrading our ability to communicate effectively with each other in person or over the phone or whatever. Like, I think it's giving us permission to not have to practice those skills, right?
It's like, it's like the big experiment, like the next couple of generations coming up, where, eye contact and an in-person conversation can be challenging, and it's not every time. And if you have that skill set, like, hold it close, right? I mean, that becomes almost the hot commodity. But you can see this super transactional, easy way. I'm thinking of business right now, where you can literally send an Instagram DM to be like, oh, can I schedule you for this time? And if not, okay, like, on to the next. It's just so fast, so easy, so instant. And there's, it jades the human element in that to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think one thing that we each get to check into, maybe before even making the decision about whether or not to release a relationship or to outgrow a relationship, is like, what do you want to experience in this life, and how do you want to feel about this decision in the long term? And then what you're kind of right now thinking about doing, is that in integrity with how you want to feel. And so I know that for me, when I consider that question now at 33, it's like, there's very few people, situations, things in my life now where the bridge burning would be the way that I would choose to outgrow or end a relationship. And likewise, I feel that for me now, ghosting or hiding is beneath my desired level of interpersonal communication. I
Right.
want to honor other people at a higher level than that, even when and especially when it's difficult for me, because I believe that there's growth in that challenge and there's a reason that I'm being presented with it. And it's probably for both people's benefit, because most challenging things usually are. And it's rarely ever only about us, but usually whatever is in us is a mirror for whatever is in others. And so when we rise to the occasion of doing something in a little bit of a different way, we're not only giving other people an opportunity to witness that, and maybe we're teaching them, but also like you just don't know what opportunity is present for them in that encounter.
You remind me of this story. I had a pretty fast friendship,
Mhm.
and really like intense. It was really like close, a lot of similarities, and through that, a lot of triggers. And with that intensity of enjoyment also became then this intensity of the trigger to literally like an unbearable point, and both parties not fully understanding in real time like why. And then just massive space, massive amounts of like, at least for me, like sort of scratching head. Maybe there was guilt, shame, wondering, just all this. So that was maybe over the course of 6 months or a year. And but never physically like seeing each other. So it was kind of fine in some ways because out of sight to a degree, and still laying heavy on my heart. So finally I was able to have processed a lot of the why of like the triggers and where I was, and take ownership for my parts, and decided to do a writing exercise to release it into the ether. Finish that and realize, oh, this would be worth sending. And so decided to send that communication. And there was then this back and forth, pretty in quick order of response. And this might have been over 2 years of like the start of the relationship to this email exchange. And it was such a cool experience for the space. And, you know, we really don't have an active friendship. I love her dearly, but that's where we are today. And an experience of taking ownership, being really clear in the communication, but the time and space for processing without that needing to be something bad.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Yeah. What I was going to say is I know we talked about the realization or the epiphany that like it's not working, and how sometimes that hits you like a 2x4. Other times it sneaks up on you slowly. You get lots of, I think it's often both. We get the little whispers. We're like, maybe it's not working. You know, maybe it's not, maybe this isn't it. Right. Whether it's friendship, job, family, whatever. And then eventually it's like, this isn't working. Right. And then if you proceed and press on, eventually it's like, this is not working. Gets louder, right? We're like,
Right.
okay. But within that, the ability to identify why it's not working, and specifically why it's not working for you. So what is it that you're experiencing, feeling, responding to that's not working for you? And I want to give an example, because I was recently outgrowing a female friendship, and what wasn't working for me was that I found myself continually experiencing guilt, shame, and perceived judgment, right? So rather than saying she was always judging me, or she expected me to be a certain way, or whatever, I don't know. I'm not in her head. I'm not in her heart. I don't know what's going on for her, but I knew what was going on for me on my end. And what I was perceiving was judgment. And what I was experiencing was guilt and shame, and like this sense of frustration and being misunderstood. And like, she wanted me to be someone, and didn't really like who I actually was. Right. And so
That's how you felt.
that's how I felt. So identifying how I felt, like what's not working for me in this, and then what would feel better? Like, how would I like to feel in a female friendship, or not? A friendship aside, it was like, well, I would like to feel non-attached to other people's judgment or non-judgment. Like I would like to feel like what you think of me is none of my business in both close, intimate, personal relationships and with strangers out on the street. I would like to feel just a sense of comfort and autonomy in who I am that's not tinged by guilt or shame, because I know that I don't have anything to feel guilty or shameful about, right? So it's like, that's how I want to feel. And having communicate. So identify why it's not working and what would feel better. And then figure out like, where's that stuff coming from? Is it coming from you? Is it coming from them? Is it coming from somewhere like in the in-between? And then tell the truth and tell it as like you said, the form can vary. It might be telling it face to face. It might be over the phone. You know, usually, generally, if you can, with vocal inflection is better than without, or more accurate, I should say. Like, I don't know if you guys have probably had the experience of like texting somebody or emailing somebody and your tone being read in a way that's different than you intended it, or being on the receiving end of that where you read somebody's text or email and you're like, that
Oh no.
like yeah, and it's like you like, you know, you flex a little bit because it just feels so abrasive, the tone, even though it's just words on a page. Like you don't know how those words are being read. So find a way to tell the truth and tell it in love. And I love what you said, Linda, which was like, maybe first that's just getting it out of yourself. So whether it's saying it into a mirror or saying it to another trusted loved one or writing a letter, but like getting it out of you will help get the emotional charge out first, maybe before you even have the conversation. When you tell the truth to the person who you're potentially outgrowing the relationship with, it helps if you can diffuse the emotional charge as much as possible. Like meaning like you're not going in there like a lit fuse, you know, you're not going in there super sensitive and like just anything they say is going to break you. Now that's not always possible. It depends how much baggage you're carrying into the conversation with you. You know what I mean?
Like a safe space. I always recommend a safe space.
Neutral space. Yeah. Not their house, your house, like somewhere where it's like neutral ground. And then I like what you said, which is like, for me, it's like tell the truth, and then tell your truth, and then be quiet. Like give them the opportunity to respond within whatever boundary you know is like safe and okay for you. Now, I'll give you guys an example. Like I left an abusive relationship years ago, and in that situation, there was no communication. Like the opportunity for communication had long since passed. And it was like, I'm packing my shit and I'm leaving while you're somewhere else. And like, you're never going to see me again. And the bridge is burning. Okay. In this one, and there's not going to be any communication or opportunity for connection or you telling your side of the story. I there's no space for that for me. For my self-preservation, there could be no room for that. Right. But if there is the ability to give space for them to communicate back, and you can actually listen and again, diffuse your emotional charge in listening, like turn off your desire to react or respond to what they say and just listen. Let their words wash over you and just let them talk. And then let that be whatever it is, and then separate, like take the space to allow integration and processing of whatever you guys just exchanged in that communication. And then decide, like, do I want to stay open to this person, this relationship potentially circling back and becoming maybe a different version of itself? Or am I with love closing that door? And maybe without love, sometimes you're closing the door with just closure. Like, nope, I don't love you and I'm closing the door.
When you have the aha of this isn't working, that can also just be enough, right? To like decide. And I think there's a progression of like doing it better, or was it in the best way? And ultimately, like each of the ways you've ever done it has been the perfect way for the perfect time, wherever you were in time and space. And now, you know, you've learned from that and you do it a little different or better, or maybe not. And you're like back to your old burn bridging.
Yeah, I think one thing to examine within yourself is like, how does this make me feel how does it make me feel when I end a relationship this way? Do I have a past experience with that? And then can I reflect on that? And what am I still carrying from that? You know, when I look back at some of the ways that I've allowed relationships to end, you know, if there's still any like lingering sense of like, oh, well, I was kind of a dick, you know, or like I could have done that better. Like that's just an indicator to me, like, okay, next time maybe I can try giving a little bit more of that space. Maybe I can try listening a little bit longer. Maybe, you know, and then give yourself like peace though. If you've done that stuff, people can only meet you at like the level to which they can meet you. You know what I mean? Like not everyone is doing the work that you're doing. Not everyone is committed to mindfulness and to observing themselves and to self-awareness. Like not everyone's doing that. So there is a place where you get to just say, you know what? Like you just said, Linda, like this isn't working.
And from the space,
yeah.
of like co-creation, like ultimately it is your responsibility to like receive whatever lesson or insight. And that's a big thing too, is when you have that feeling of what you don't want or like what isn't working for you, understanding if there's something within yourself that could be healed or still has some space for additional processing. And this was recent, I'd say within a year, I took like an inventory of, in a lot of ways, it's exactly what we're talking about, like ends of relationships. There could have been trauma experiences, but anything that I felt was still a little like sticky for me. And I wrote every single one of them down on a column. I like divided the paper in half. And on the other side, it was like, I forgive myself for, and what I learned was. And that was this really like intensely therapeutic experience, because it's like I didn't have to carry anything else with me. And there were lessons even from the beginning of time, that whether it's just contrast or an ability to show up in a different way, or just to know I don't like this, I just don't like this, and I don't even necessarily have to know why, to really process and to capture the gift of the lesson. And so if there's relationships that if in today's time you would have ended or done something differently, you know, give yourself the gift of acknowledging like what you could forgive yourself for, and whatever that lesson could be.
Yeah. And also, you know, you'll know when you look within, like, if the person's still alive and you're still alive, like you still have the opportunity to potentially make reparations or healing or figure out, like, I'm gonna get a little vulnerable and share a real example with you guys. When I was 22, I was after I left that abusive relationship, I was choosing some really unhealthy relationships with men, doing a lot of drugs, and really just in a really bad place. And I hid from my whole family. I moved to the East Coast from California, and I hid from my immediate family. I mean, occasionally I'd probably talk to them once a month, but from my extended family, it was like, I could give two shits about my extended family at this point. Like, they're just people that happen to have some shared blood. They don't know me. They've got no influence on my life. Right. And my paternal grandmother at that time, when, probably a year and a half into kind of that phase of my life, sent me a letter, and it was very harsh. Like, it was she was saying, you're fucking up, basically. Like, you're fucking up and you're making bad decisions and you're hurting your family. And, that was the letter. And at that time, I was in so much pain already in my own life. And I just felt like I've spent time with this person in person less than a handful of times in my entire life. I felt like this person doesn't know me, right? And I just felt like, how dare you try to tell me how to live my life? I don't even know you, was the way that I felt. And so I decided to burn the bridge. And it was just a mental thing. Like, in my mind, there was me with my little can of gasoline and my little hang bridge, and it was like, whoosh, there it goes, right? And this month, and so this really is like, this is like currently happening. You know, I saw my aunt post on Facebook, you know, my grandma's turning 94. And I just had this realization and I was like, man, you've been a real dick, you know? So it's like, well, self, would you like to keep being a dick or would you like to heal it? And I was like, well, I kind of want to keep being a dick just because I'm stubborn, but the bigger part of me wants to heal it. And it was like, okay, then try to heal it. You know what I mean? Send a letter, send a package, apologize. It doesn't have to be complicated. Explain what happened then and where you are now, and just like extend the olive branch, right? And I don't know what's going to happen from that yet because that package just went out probably 10 days ago. But if nothing else, and I could cry just thinking about it, like if nothing else, like I know that I have that integrity of like, okay, I'm acting like the woman that I want to be, you know, and that feels really good. And so I think if you take nothing else from this, when it comes to outgrowing relationships, just ask yourself, like, the person who I want to be, how would they handle this? You know? And
know that that is you.
yeah. Even if sometimes it's you 10 years down the road. All right. So that brings us to the book club.
Book club.
So today we're sharing a book called Relational Mindfulness by Deborah Eden Toll. And it is a handbook for deepening our connection with ourselves, each other, and the planet. So this is it's a book of practices and essentially implementation of meditation in life. So basically taking meditation off of the cushion and into your life through a set of principles and practices for deepening intimacy and remembering that interconnection, which are relationships, is our birthright, and that it all starts from being fully present. So when we bring our presence into each moment, into each encounter, each conversation, each breakup, then we can really operate and embody compassionate awareness with ourselves, with each other, and with the planet as a whole. So I am excited about this book because it really blends a lot of beautiful theory examples with some practical implementation tools. So it gives like mindful inquiry, which are basically journaling opportunities. And it also provides daily practices. So I'll just give you guys a quick example from page 59. The daily practice is stop. And all this is a practice that will help you turn your attention within regularly as often as you want throughout the day. And it goes like this. Stop is an acronym. S is for actually stop, meaning pause, like simply pause. T, take a couple of conscious breaths and turn your attention within. O, observe what's arising in your body, feelings and mind with curiosity and non-judgment. And then P is proceed. So stop, simply pause, take a couple conscious breaths, turn your attention within, observe what's arising in your body, and then proceed. So it's that simple acronym of stop. And I think if you do that, especially in conversation that's getting heated, like we've talked about this before when we talked about conscious communication, that can be really a helpful way to just realize like, oh, I'm about to lose my shit on this person and I don't actually want to do that. Noticing what the feelings are in your body, breathing, and then moving forward. So Relational Mindfulness, Deborah Eden Toll, we'll drop it in the show notes. You guys can check that out if you feel like you want to work on cultivating a more mindful relationship with yourself and with others.
When you said the STOP acronym, I thought of the Spice Girls song.
Tell me the song. I don't know if I need it.
Stop right now. Thank you very much. I need
somebody with a human touch. You're welcome for singing. And that's all we'll leave you today.
Thank you, Rise to Thrivers.
Yeah, we love you guys. We appreciate you. We hope that whatever relationships you're going through and growing through in your life right now, that this episode has given you a little bit more space to identify what feels good for you, what doesn't, and how you want to proceed in integrity of the person that you desire to be. So we love you guys. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, write us a review. You guys, reviews are everything. We're so grateful for your reviews. Share it with a friend, and we will catch you next week. We'll be dropping gems weekly so you can thrive daily. All right. See you guys on the flip side.